We have Bonnie Reimann, who teaches at Gustavus Adolphus. She is a board member for us. She's in the higher ed division. We've got Erin Banks, who is also a board member for us in the higher ed division and also at Gustavus. We've got Lisa Paulson, who is up in Duluth, teaching at UMD. And then we've got Michaela Braun, okay. Braun, who is one of our future professionals on our board. And then we've got a few other people joining us here as well. So Bonnie, Erin, and Lisa, I'll let you guys take it away.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. And I think we have a small enough group where we can just do some brief introductions. So I know we have a couple of panelists, and we tried to pre-record this and had a group of panelists that were gonna give their advice and some recommendations and some tips and tricks for future professionals, and had some problems with the audio. And so we're trying it again, and we're really thankful to have some future professional, or I mean, some panelists with us. But we also did a Google survey, and we're going to share and summarize some of their answers. We were lucky to get some really good input, and I think the overwhelming response is that people are willing to help and work and really invested in our profession, and I think they've got some great information to share. So maybe we could just, Megan, thanks for that introduction, and maybe we can just go around and just say who you are, where you're from, and if you're a panelist or a future professional or just here to listen in. So Andy, do you want to start? And then we can just, if there's a gap, just chime in.
Sure. My name is Andy Sharp. I am originally from Hopkins, Minnesota. I am in my 8th year of teaching. I am a Gustavus alumni of class of 2011. I currently teach middle school PE and health at Woodbury Leadership Academy in Woodbury, Minnesota. And I'm also, a part of that is I'm also a dean of students.
Bonnie, do you just want to call people as you see them on your screen?
Yeah, I don't know that everybody, how about Mark? Or we can jump in and you can introduce yourself if you have a question, or if you're a panelist, we'd really appreciate your input.
I'm Nancy Christensen. I'm the current executive director for MinShape. I'm a retired teacher after 43 years. Most of my teaching was done at the university level. However, I did do 5 years in K through 12 in my earlier teaching, and that's me.
All right, I think I heard Mark.
Yeah. Sorry. This is Mark from Illinois, and I just want to hear some ideas and some things that Minnesota is doing with their future professionals, so I can take that back to IAFERD and do that here back in Illinois.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Hey everybody, I'm Leanne Boucher. I'm an adapted PE teacher in Duluth, and I'm fortunate enough to get to work with Lisa and do some work with the future professionals. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities to collaborate and do a lot of neat things between the groups. And I have to say, umyaya, sorry, Gusties.
All right, well, again, if you do have a question, either way, future professional or panelist, please go ahead, and we've got people monitoring the chat and they'll chime in. Otherwise, feel free to be interactive. And I think, we'll take it away. Lisa, are you ready?
Yeah, I will. I asked Jim Hamble to be here, obviously all the way from New York, but pretty easy to attend. So he is a teacher. He actually he's got a pretty interesting perspective. So I just wanted to introduce him as a panelist as well. He is actually currently not teaching PE, as we've sort of run into this year. Many, unfortunately, have been asked to teach, in the classroom or do other jobs and have other roles. And so he can speak to how that is looking, as well as the questions that we have sort of outlining our discussion today that were on that Google form. So I envision this as, obviously we have a lot more people in higher ed here, and Michaela, feel free to ask questions and jump in. I'm so glad you're here, but perhaps this can serve as an informal conversation, and then perhaps even like we can show this in our classes or have our students watch it thereafter. So
yeah, we definitely have some requirements coming up where our students are going to be watching this. So I think it'll prove to be very valuable. So let's just jump in. The first thing that we had talked about in our first attempt at recording this was about the Education Minnesota survey that was put out. There was over, I think it was 9,700 teachers that were surveyed, and not great stuff that came out of that as far as, I think 30% said they were severely overwhelmed, stressed, really frustrated. 35% are applying for retirement, especially with the hybrid option. So I think the first thing we want to talk about is what everybody's doing to build resiliency, and what self-care practices are you putting into place. So I've got the summary from the survey that we sent out, but if any of you want to chime in, that would be really great. How do you build resiliency, and what do you do for self-care?
Can I go first?
go for it, Jim.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, one thing that's being resilient, I mean, honestly, I've been teaching for 8 years, phys ed, 2 actually special ed, and thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. Honestly, well, because I have 3 licenses, so I mean, it's not ideal, but I'm doing remote, so I fully understand where everyone's coming from, and honestly, it's great for me. Honestly, just accepting, and it's hard to do, but it's like accepting things. There are things out of my professionals, like seeing the silver lining is that, like, when else would I have been able to, like, from New York, I was in Illinois and talk to Minnesota. So just trying to, like, discover and trying to do new things. I know Elisa from the shape, like, just trying to be, and just trying to learn as much as I can, and just trying to do what's best. And just try to, like, so this way, just to feel like, just, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but just to know that other people are going to that, and just be able to talk to them is just a huge thing. So that kind of leads to my self-care. But I mean, since a lot of it now, especially phys ed teachers, it's the transition to, I was remote in the spring, and just honestly, like, the amount of steps on my Fitbit are just, like, totally down. So just really just having to, like, force myself to just put the computer down and just honestly go for a walk, or just, some jumping jacks, or just making sure that I don't get too and go roast with my work or whatever, because it's strategic with my time has made a big difference.
Great. I think that was an overwhelming response from the survey, is just setting those boundaries, signing off, setting boundaries between work and play, and having a schedule. That was overwhelmingly, people said that was really helpful towards self-care. Andy, did you want to share?
Sure. I have a dual role this year, and I did last year and for a couple of years. So I'm, like, part admin, I'm also part teacher. So I wear, like, many hats throughout the day. So I was, in my particular school, in the decision-making process on what our model was for the fall and for this school year. So I think at first I was hesitant, like all teachers across the United States, in terms of what models were, and online versus on-site, and all these different models. But I have just such a very collaborative and supportive small school that, yes, I am teaching online and on-site, but I feel very supported, and I think our COVID-19 plan is fairly consistent. We've only had about 2 positive cases at our school for the school year so far. I know other districts have had more. So I'm kind of proud that we've only had 2. one thing for self-care, like Bonnie said, was, definitely I'm very strict about, signing off at 4:15 when my contract ends. Yes, I do have an admin role in some capacity, so I do respond to some emails that I need to and not, but definitely as a new teacher or a future professional, definitely setting those boundaries is definitely very important.
Thanks, Andy. Anybody else?
I think that self-care is like this relatively cliche term that is sort of this buzz that goes around, and it's kind of like, well, do you practice self-care? And everybody's self-care looks so different, and there's probably a lot of reasons why not to practice self-care, for all the reasons probably on that Google form, like my schedule's too busy, or because it feels like one more thing to do. And I don't know that self-care should feel hard. And so, I just think it looks very different for everybody. And it's not necessarily like, did you do self-care today? It's more so like your mindset, and like trying to flip it to a gratitude versus a victim mindset, and having it, like having a commitment to yourself too, even if it's like, maybe it's your workout, or maybe it's going to get a latte, or maybe, everybody's looks so different. But I think that a barrier perhaps, or to remove the barrier to entry, would to stop looking at it as one more thing to do and start thinking of it as like just part of your routine.
Yeah, good point. Making sure you schedule it. Aaron, were you going to say something?
Yeah, that really resonated with me, Lisa. We talk a lot in our classes about resiliency currently. And so that's kind of a buzzword going around. And we talk a lot about the concept of resiliency, and just the idea of trying to recognize your fixed mindset versus your growth mindset, and what trips you up to always stay in that box of that fixed mindset, as opposed to recognizing, okay, I need to get outside of that box and grow here. And this is an opportunity to grow. So just continuing to think about resiliency and taking time for yourself, and whatever it is, we're hearing a lot of really good tips there.
Some of the things
I had a question for Lisa Smith, actually. Following up on Andy Sharp. Andy, you were saying that you get off at 4:15, and so you try and have boundaries like that. Lisa, are you able to have boundaries with your day, or what does your day look like? I'm just curious.
Do you want the honest answer?
Yeah, I want to know.
Yes, but I have to be very intentional about those boundaries. Yeah. So what I found in the beginning of this shift in education, and having to serve and not having to, a lot of these roles that I play and I serve in are choices. So, and that's the thing that we need to, I had a lot of reflection on, was all of these choices that I make to involve myself in, whether, being involved in MinShape was a choice, and taking on a leadership role was a choice. Did I anticipate doing it in a pandemic while teaching distance learning all new things? No, I didn't. But, that's what helped me, prioritize that these were choices that I made, that I made commitments to. And so things that, came along that maybe I could say no to was really necessary. And I'm not really a no person. And I've learned that that's healthy, and it's okay, and it's good. And, I've talked a lot about this with my students too, about being able to prioritize and shutting themselves off at certain times. And I have had to do that for myself. And I literally would put my computer away. My phone would be in several rooms away. I would take my watch off, and it was a physical separation from the things that were, bringing stressors into my life. So it's a really good question, and applying it to, future professionals, where we're told not to say no. Right? I mean, the first question that's asked sometimes after you get hired is, what can you coach? What can you advise? What can you do? And so, I remember that coming out of college and thinking, well, I thought I was pretty involved then, but I guess I'm going to step it up. Right. And so then it just kind of, as long as you have an idea of that, these are choices that you're making, and that you have to intentionally put in these breaks. I'm a very scheduled person at this point in my life, and yeah, scheduled time. And it's kind of crazy that I've had to schedule time in for my family. It's weird, but like it's there. So, yeah, and I know like Megan can say the same thing. I mean, we'll converse about things and she's like, I literally haven't left my screen all day. And that's it. And it's not that screen, or it's this screen, or it's like every other screen that we're doing. And people too. Like when I was teaching from home and the neighbors would be outside, I'd be like, I want to go outside, but I can't, you couldn't. And so it was just really having to set boundaries for yourself. And, if that phone call comes in and you're like, I know this is going to be a long one, really setting parameters and saying, I have 10 minutes. I'm literally going to put on a timer, and I really like you and I want to continue this conversation, but I really only have 10 minutes. And I've had to do that. So it's okay to do that. And people, I haven't had anybody, complain about it, but always pick it up later. But setting parameters, setting boundaries, staying hard to them, being clear about them if you're going to be having other people affected is, I guess, my advice.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Lisa.
Yeah, pick my brain, guys. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I think too, it's one thing to get advice, and we're going to talk a little bit about finding a mentor. It's one thing to get advice, and usually the advice is you have to say no. But then like it's the reality that the expectations are that you do everything as a first year teacher, and there's so many opportunities and you want to get involved. But I do think you have to be really intentional. Just a couple other things. One thing I really liked, from the survey, he said, if you're constantly overworked, if you're finding that every night you're bringing papers home, you need to be more formative and reflective. And you need to, reflection should be hammered through all of us. But, if you're finding that you're overworked, you're going to get burned out. So, you need to change. You need to stop and say, what am I doing wrong and what can I do better? And maybe I can, do some professional development and find out straighter, easier ways to grade or do assessment or whatever it might be, because inevitably you'll burn out if you're finding that you're constantly working in the evenings and not taking that time off. One other thing I really like was find something every day that brings you joy, brings your heart joy and come alive. So I love that. Hopefully that meshes with your vocation and you're all finding that in your work too, but finding some hobbies that bring you joy. Anything else on this one? Get outdoors, exercise, listen to podcasts, find your hobby.
In the group chat, Mark had asked a question directed towards the future professionals that are here regarding what is a future professional looking for from the state association as this individual prepares for a career in health or PE. And Michaela jumped in and answered that question. But Michaela, tell us what your answer to that question is, because I think it's great.
I think the biggest thing for me was having a professor. My professor and my advisor was Shannon Norman at Bemidji State University, and she was awesome. And I think the biggest thing for us, we've never been in the profession. We might have gone to field experiences, but it gives you just a little glimpse. You're only there for a few hours. You don't really see the behind the scenes things. So just having professors and advisors that are approachable and available to you is so important, and made me feel a lot comfortable asking questions that you don't learn just in everyday college classes. And so I think the biggest thing is just to be open and remind your students that you are there for them and that you want them to succeed. And I think that'll help students be a lot more comfortable asking questions.
If I could follow up on that, Michaela. So those are connections that you've generated at your university, college, wherever you're attending. And as you get involved with Minnesota Shape leadership, are there people that you work closely with there that help you along this same journey, that maybe give you a different look, because they may not happen to be, your professor, and they're coming at it from a different angle, from being in the field that you're ready to enter into? Is there some kind of connection that you make besides just within the educational field, but within this leadership role?
Yeah, there's tons. MinShape it's can't even explain how it's just great networking all around. You meet other future professionals that are from different colleges who are learning different things because not all programs are the same. You meet teachers that have been teaching for 1, 2, 3 years. You meet teachers who are retired, principals. You meet so many people, and everybody has a different view and a different journey as how they got to where they are now. So I think MinShape is a huge networking and just even having conversations that aren't related to your career, and you're just getting to know people on a deeper level. And I think that's helped tremendously as well.
Mark,
Awesome.
I can echo a little bit off of Michaela a little bit, because I was a product of my professors really instilling laying the groundwork that being a part of your professional organization is what's going to make you a better professional. And so my professors at Winona State, Dr. Gail Grimm, I mean, she's like my mom and PE mom, and she drug us all over the place. I mean, I remember going up to MSUM and seeing Nancy talking, in front of everybody and doing all of that, and Sutar and all of them. And like, that was the reason why I, stayed involved and continued to be involved. And there was breaks when I wasn't necessarily, directly involved, but I always knew what was going on, always maintained my membership, always did all that kind of stuff, because like Michaela said, I mean, it's always there for you. And no matter where you are in your career, hopefully people can feel supported through MinShape, and, also support others in giving back. So that's where I feel like I'm getting to a little bit, but I know that I still want to really rely heavily on our retirees. And I want to bring there's just so many people that can help each other. And we have a lot of different groups that could work together. And I think that's kind of what the next level of MinShape can look like.
That's awesome. I love that collaborative thought process there and cooperation. I'm really sorry, but I have so many questions, and I'll end my questioning here. The last question, and I heard the beginning comment of the concern with the number of teachers that are retiring. And Illinois is in a tremendous teacher shortage, as we all are. And it's not just within health and physical education. And one of the conversations I keep trying to have with leadership is to look at ways of recruiting high school students. We all have those educators that are out in the field already that could help us identify those juniors and seniors. Is there any conversation with this unbelievable panel here of higher ed people? Is there any conversation to start to have that view of how can we recruit those high school juniors and seniors to come into the field? I would really love to hear any kind of ideas that are out there about that. I
can go there if you want. So I'm really proud of this. This is one of my things I like to tell people. So when I teach unified PE, and so I've been doing it for a long time, and every single year I've pushed out at least one future PE teacher. I'm so excited about that. Annika Culver, she's on our board. She was in my first class. I've got Erica Anderson, who's a student of Sutar's down at MSUM right now, that I was a former high school student of mine. And so, really what I did with my high school classes, and I would talk to them a lot about what it was like to be a teacher, because, and when I have that luxury of doing that. And so I think our high school teachers can really start having that conversation with kids while they're in high school, especially, if schools are in a pathways program, they may have already started having those communicative, ideas and stuff with them. But I do talk a lot with my students about that and give them a glimpse about what it's like to be a teacher if they're really interested in education, and giving them that like back behind the scenes thing, that it's like, it's not all it seems. And whether the good and the bad and the ugly, like all of that. And so I think really starting to have those conversations about, what education looks like, and the importance of it, and what a fresh perspective can bring, because, you know, like I said before, these kids are living in this time of this incredible change of education. And we would be doing ourselves a complete disservice if we don't shift with it. And so as they are learning, like living it, they're going to be our next group of future educators. So, you know, really starting to think about what that looks like in the high school level is a great idea. And maybe having those college students go back to their schools and talk to them about, this is why I chose education. This is why I chose physical education or health. And, you know, doing all of that, you know, I think partnerships and even like mentorships with college students is so helpful. I used to have my unified PE kids, like graduates, come back and talk to my students again. And they would all, I mean, not just about PE, but like life and after that. And it was really great how many of them were choosing education and not just PE. But, you know, looking at that would be something that we could definitely do. And I think that our retirees could play a really big role in that too, because that's like bridging a huge generational gap where they can all learn from one another. And that'd be really neat. So I'm just spitballing out there right now.
I was just going to quickly say too, that I think there's real, you know, power and influence if you just tell a younger student, if you notice a talent that they might have some leadership abilities or some talent in teaching, just saying, I think you'd make a great teacher. And a lot of times just having you say it, they're like, really? Oh my gosh, I should look into that. And it's really powerful. So I think if you notice that in students, you know, teachers, that sometimes feeds the interest in teaching. Andy, did you unmute for a second, or Nancy too?
I just to tack on to that, when I was at Moorhead State, I worked with the student teachers a lot also, but it's amazing how you can pick out a student, especially a senior in those senior classes, and sit down and talk with them. And Lisa, I had the same type of a situation happen. Several kids that I had watched or observed with my student teachers did end up coming into education, and specifically physical education, because you can tell which ones are going to do a good job.
Right, definitely. So good segue. We'll just move a little bit into talking about mentors. So advocacy, building resiliency. I think this we didn't have any comments, but it was a rating, and most of our survey, the people we surveyed said finding a mentor, having a mentor was like extremely important. If anybody wants to talk about that, I mean, obviously, hopefully MinShape can serve as mentors to young teachers as they're coming up. But if you want to speak to anybody, to the mentor that you had, or being a mentor and the value and importance of that, that would be awesome.
I can talk to that part. So Michaela had talked about when she was she is still a college, or no, you're done being in college. But when you were a student, that you really connected with Shannon Norman, your professor. And that's what I did as well. Sutar, who's on this call also, her and I really connected, and I went to her a lot for mentorship things. She was also on the MinShape board when I was a future professional, and I joined because she was on the board. And I knew someone. I thought, you know, oh, this would be a great opportunity. So I've been on the MinShape board since I was a future professional, and I talk to Sue a lot still every day. I talk to her about, you know, MinShape things. I talk to her about teaching things, just personal things. So having that person that you can really connect with on different levels, I think is helpful. And connecting with someone that you know is in, maybe not so I was talking to some of my coworkers, and they were saying, you know, it's nice to talk to other coworkers in the same building as you, but it's also nice to talk to other people in the same profession, but not in your building, because they're not in that same setting as you, and they're not getting the same exact experiences, but they have very similar experiences. And so I think that's how I see a lot of different things with Sue, is that she's teaching in a college. I'm in a K-12 school system, but it's still a similar field, and it's still things that we can connect on, and I can go to her for advice. And so I think just sticking with people that are like-minded is really helpful, and people that you can connect with on different levels.
Megan, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Because I honestly, you know what, and it's so refreshing to hear that, because honestly, I mean, I could tell you, even when I was in college at Adelphi in Garden City, we learned that we had the same exact things: network, network, network. And honestly, the same things that are doing in Minnesota are, happening inside of New York. So it's nice to find others who are going through the process or doing the same thing, like you said. I think like I joined my Adelphi had a major phys ed majors club, which I joined. I've always been the kind of person who wanted to, give back and also learn and realize that there are a lot of things I don't know. So it would be in my best interest to kind of maybe, pick people's brains. Like one of my professors, Dr. Mara Manson, I still talk to as well all the time. She has been a great one. Just going to the local, New York is a little bit different because we have local organizations. So like I'm New York City, but then there's also like all the elementary section, there's a middle school section, secondary. So it's kind of the process, just trying to find like-minded people that, just kind of like you get along with. In the same building is great. Well, sometimes it's elementary teachers, but I'm the only one. But I do want to interest, like one of the great things about, like I said, like, just understand, like, I think it's really cool. Like when I graduated in 2008, like things like this would never have been like across my mind. Like on a Saturday, I'm talking to people in Minnesota, but just like things like Twitter has bring abroad. And granted, the Twitter could be a massive universe, but things like that where you could literally find people in other parts of the world who could do it. So there is, I guess the thing is that don't be afraid to ask and have an open mind, because like you literally can learn from something. And like you said, people in the same building, well, it's always nice. I always figure it's nice to have someone or be able to talk to someone who, even if they're not a mentor, someone that you could, talk to all the time. A lot of times people become mentors, even if they're on the same, it's just nice to have someone to go and just also pick their brain with, because a lot of times you're seeing it from a fresh point of view could make, could lead to bigger and better things. So it's nice to see that it's happening. It's great to hear like that it's happening in all places, all over the place.
Thank you, guys. Oh, go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, I'm Sherry Holloway, and I spent 20 years teaching in elementary and DAPE, and now I've kind of got the backside of the circle where currently I have 6 of my elementary students in my higher ed programs becoming physical education teachers. And it's really heartwarming for me, because a lot of times different assignments and different questions I'll ask, they reflect on their past and their experiences in my classes as littles. So it's really a nice relationship that we're building that way as well, that I can support them as they're going through higher ed. I'd like to see now, talking and listening with this group, them to go back and talk with students again. So I think that's kind of a cool reflection too.
Awesome.
Can I jump
Thank
in
you.
quick too?
Yeah, Aaron.
I'm, just sitting here thinking about this and being part of MinShape on and off over the years, and thinking about ways to engage our future professionals in the organization. I don't know if we've ever done this, but just the whole idea of mentorship, where you could use the organization as a way to pair future professionals with people across the state. So rather than just reaching out to your alumni, you're reaching out to the organization, like a contact in the organization, and you're saying, hey, I've got an intro to physical education class right now, or a methods course right now, and I'd like to have my 15 students, be mentored by different people across the state and get different ideas and feedback. And I think that'd be really powerful, especially, it's awesome when you do it with your own alumni, but it'd be really cool to do it with people that are coming from all these different institutions, because there's so many great people out there and you hear all these great stories about all these great people. So
I like that idea, Aaron. Nice. So we have about 20 minutes left. We're probably not going to get to everything, but I'm so glad that we're having such great discussion and that we're on live, because it's just re-energizing to be on live and be able to talk. And so I'm really glad to hear that. I think we have a few other topics. So would really like to talk about interview tips and strategies. Would also love to talk about assessment if time. But I think what I'd like to transition to now, and anybody can speak to this, what is something that you maybe wish you would have learned in your undergrad that you sort of found out the hard way?
I think for me, one thing is learning about workshop week. When I was an undergrad, I mean, you're told, oh, there's workshop week and everyone goes to it and things like that. But I never knew that none of it would be relevant to me as a PE health and adapted PE teacher. It's just mostly to like the classroom teachers or, literacy. Like that's a huge piece in all of the buildings that I've worked in. Their big pieces are literacy, different things about incorporating math, reading, all of that kind of stuff. And really very little of workshop week pertains to health PE and adapted PE. And so you're kind of like on your own island and you have to really work to get to know what works in your district and in your building. So it's helpful to know that you should also connect with people that are in your district that aren't necessarily working with you in your building. I think that's something that I wish I had known as a future professional.
Yeah, that and like CEUs, and that you should be keeping track of those. How that all works. Anybody else?
Well, I know I've been out a long time since my first teaching job, but the hardest thing for me was to learn how to work with an older physical education teacher that had been there forever and did not want change, did not want this young person coming in and teaching the way she'd been taught to teach. And I still hear that. I was still hearing that from students at Morehead State. How can I get the teacher to let me teach the way I would like to teach? And I'm not sure what the answer is, but that teacher almost drove me out. In fact, I quit my job after working with her for 2 years and went on to grad school because I thought I'd gone into the wrong profession. I thought this is awful. But I'm not sure that we're doing a very good job of letting our students know that it's okay for a while, but they have to learn how to adapt to make better changes.
Nancy, I was like, oh, when you said that, because I full know well, like my first, even there's a lot that needs to be focused on in teaching, like how you teach. But honestly, like I have a special ed degree, and even a lot of times, at any time, a special ed teacher could be working with another teacher in another classroom, and even then, it's really just kind of like a chapter in a book. So, but honestly, like just being able to like how to get along, and because honestly, teaching is I would always say like 20% it's not even so much the content what you're teaching, it's how you teach it, but being able to work with someone, that is a powerful thing, because I always feel like two heads are better than one. But like when you said that, I was just like that is something that I did not know at first, and sometimes it's a steep learning curve. But I definitely think I echo that like right away, because that is something that I wish I knew. And it's taken time, but that's something I wish I knew more of.
I can echo that too. That's exactly what I was going to say as well, Nancy and Jim, is that I think that's what happens because people stay in one place that's good for a long time. And I'm actually in a new role this year at a new school with people that opened this school in 2006. And so I stepped into very traditional practices. And luckily I came in to some colleagues that were open for the most part to some new ideas, and have also let me kind of just do my own thing. And then we'll watch and be like, well, what is that you're doing? And so being respectful and maintaining that bit of tradition is necessary, because there is something to be said to be learned. But like Nancy said, I also, at my previous job that I was at, my first job out of college, I had a very similar situation with as Nancy did, and mine ended a little differently, where I had a lot of backing up, from being able to do my own thing, but I didn't want to be disrespectful. And that's where I think, how do you have that conversation? I mean, this has been going on for forever. I mean, how do you have this conversation? And I had administration that were just like, Lisa, just do your own thing. It's fine. You don't have to do the same thing. But when you have little comments coming on saying, well, if you don't do this, then you won't get tenure. or like these rumors or these ideas that are like these just old practices. It's, you must just have to be like, okay, and just keep asking questions. And I think that is what saved me, was that I just asked so many questions of everybody that I eventually got everything answered. And I would ask questions of the person that I was challenged by. And I saw it as more of a challenge more than a threat, I think too. And so if you kind of see it that way and try to see things differently, and I understand that every situation is very different and everybody is going to be very different in the approach of things. So my biggest recommendation on that is to just ask a ton of questions. You can never ask too many questions, because what's the worst that could happen? You hear an answer you don't particularly like, then you have to figure it out. So, those are all skills that I think that we need to work on. And yes, we say our kids are being raised in a digital age, and these college students absolutely are so technologically savvy that they're fantastic. And we can say that some of their soft skills are maybe hindered by some of this. And so self-advocacy, being able to ask questions, being able to say, I need help with this, and say, how can I work with somebody? And that's where that mentorship thing comes into play as well, to give help with ideas, with conversations, and having difficult conversations, because those are skills that we all need, but especially future professionals.
I'm just going to piggyback off that. This is Andy. I think one thing that I was very not prepared to do was interacting with parents and families. I definitely did not have the skills to do that. I don't think my student teaching experience really allowed me to do that as much as I would like or would have liked to. As I taught for a couple of years, I gained those relationships with those parents. But my background, actually, I taught in Madison, Wisconsin for 6 years. So my experience here in Minnesota is quite different now that I've had, 6 years under my belt, but it was extremely difficult to, interact with some parents that were, had kind of I don't really care what my kid is, basically I'm sending my kids to school because, you guys, that's your job, and so very inequitable, really, conversations with some parents that, really didn't think school was a very important thing at the time. So that's what I would add.
So good, so good. Bonnie, I think we have a few other things, but I don't know if we have time for maybe one or two more topics. I do think that interview tips would be a good way to end. So are you okay with moving on to that?
Yeah. And words of wisdom.
Yeah.
We have that as well. So, the other one that
we can combine.
The other one that we had was technology. And I think the message there was a lot of great technology. And I think most of you have tapped into so many great things. The message there was, you don't have to be necessarily hip and trendy. Whatever you do, master it, be good at it, somebody in the chat said, be open-minded. And I think that goes with just about everything. I think it's really, at least it is for me, super overwhelming with all the technology, and you always see something that you should be doing or you feel like you should be doing. And I think, keep it simple, feel like you're in control instead of it controlling you with technology. And if anybody wants to add something to technology, that would be great. Otherwise, I think we're, down to those last two questions.
I just think it's easy to scratch the surface on so many different things when you see all these flashy ideas, and then you don't really dig in deep enough to be able to integrate. And like, our college students are tech savvy, but they're not teaching with technology savvy per se. And so I think that's a big part of our job right now, because I know that for me and probably all of you, everything that I'm learning right now, I'm absolutely going to enhance my teaching with later, so.
I see that Jim put Pear Deck, and I had just the first time last week, and a bunch of people in the survey, Pear Deck and more Pear Deck. So it's an awesome tool. All right, Lisa, do you want to hit the interview tips?
Yeah, I think that maybe we can just combine those two questions as we get closer to 3 o'clock here, or 3:00. We have till 3 or 3:05, Megan.
2:55.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, because Lisa and Tom are at 3. Okay. So any words of wisdom that we want to leave with, and or if you have an interview tip that you think is really, really important for future professionals to know.
I think one of the biggest tips would be to have like 3 to 5 questions prepared at the end of your interview to ask your interview panelists. Because I had like 3 or 5 questions prepared, and they were like very surprised that I had like asked good questions, because they're kind of like, I think the worst thing you can do is when they ask you, do you have any questions? And you can just be like, no, not really. But try to come up with some great questions that you can ask them and get to know them more. And I think that is a really good tip. Just ask questions at the end of your interview.
Michaela, I totally agree with that one. And I've read a lot of places that, like, if they ask you, they actually, if you don't have any questions, it kind of looks like maybe you didn't study up. And I mean, a lot of places, a lot of schools, even, you know, you could find some kind of information about them. I mean, the job I have now, I went on an August afternoon. I didn't know where I was going, but I was able to find, you know, one of the brochures they use for PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention System. So, and just also remember, like, I mean, if you're going like on an August day, where these are people too. So like an interview is almost so much that it's not just asking them asking you questions to get to know them, but also try to gauge and based on, like, if they're the kind of person, if you say, what are the other kinds, like, what kind of traits are you looking for in a person? And it's very narrow minded. I mean, like, think to yourself, I mean, are you gonna be able to fit in there? Like, is that gonna be a good fit for you? So it should be a two-way dialogue. And also I won't take too much time, and I really appreciate it. But one of my best just interview tips is don't ever go, try not to stammer, just go, the best thing I always want to just say, that's a great question. Literally word for word. I'm all about that. Take that, say, that's a great question. Can I have a minute or two to think about it? Because this will give them because it means you're actually thinking, you're processing it, and then it gives you can have a very fluid answer. So I find those are just little things like that. It just makes it a better conversation. Thank you, Michaela. Appreciate it.
I would agree with Jim. I am definitely one of those people when I interview do that a lot. And what tip that I do is I write, even though they may present you with questions, is writing down some ideas as they're verbally asking you, so that I can really focus my answer and have it be precise and concise, so that I'm not doing that. Or I'll ask them, you know, can I have like a couple of seconds just to jot some things down? That way I'm not doing that. One thing that I would say for interviews is echoing what Michaela said is, you know, do some research on the school that you're interviewing for. Look into what community offerings they have, what the neighborhood's like, what activities they offer. Are they an avid school? Things like that. So other things that make them stand out from other schools that are in the area, or what's their mission statement is something that they might bring up. So all good things.
Awesome. Well, I think we are a minute past time. So thank you all so much for the good conversation. I think it's going to be great to be able to help out our future professionals. So glad it's archived on the website. Any last remarks from you, Bonnie?
Yeah, I just want to say we've got a couple of people that are willing to do mock interviews. That's in the chat. And then there's a lot of really good final words of wisdom from the survey. And I don't know if there's a way to add that as a handout, maybe, Megan. But again, to summarize it, people said, you know, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard being an HPE teacher. You're going to have times when you're going to cry, but hopefully you'll have every day something to laugh about, and that you are valuable. We need you. And I think you have a lot of support. So you've got a lot of people to turn to, and they want you to be successful. They want you to be their colleague. And so keep that in mind and find those people. You know, one of the best standards is advocacy. And I think you need to advocate for yourself and find those people that are going to support you and be positive. And thanks.